Hi everyone, welcome to the GDC Twitch channel. My name is Brian Francis, the invisible voice inside your head, the person hosting your game development adventure today. We are here today checking out a game called MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, which, if you're like me, this series should be very familiar to you because it was a big staple of 1990s PC gaming. In the last couple of years, we've also had the new BattleTech game, which came from Harebrained Schemes. But today, we're getting back in the world of mech piloting. We are, as you can see right now, suiting up to get into a nice big stompy mech. And this game comes to us from the fine folks at Piranha Games. In the lower left-hand corner of the screen, Piranha Games CEO Russ Bullock is joining us today. Russ, how you doing?
Great. Thanks. Thanks for your interest, and glad that it sounds like you like the game, and I think that's all any developer, wants to hear. Well, okay, they want to hear that the game is successful, but one of the more rewarding things is seeing that the fans got what they wanted out of it.
Right on. Going over to the chat real quick, going to give a quick shout out to some of our viewers like Unnatural Flavors who've shown up already. For folks in chat, if you're not familiar with our stream, what we do is we'll be talking to Russ about the making of MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, and we're going to be taking your questions. So if you have questions about MechWarrior 5, if you want to know about mech design, if you want to have questions about balancing heat levels, ask them in chat. People like Veritas the Snazzy Dragon, feel free to just ask questions. We will pass them on to Russ, the ones that are on topic, and from there, we will just hopefully learn more about how this game got made. Russ, like I said, implied before, MechWarrior was once a dominant PC shooter game. It's kind of a simulation game, shooter game, because not just because it was a bunch of levels where you popped in a mech and shot things, but also because you chose an array of mechs, you managed your mechs in your hangar across a variety of missions, and then around 2000, MechWarrior 4 was the last proper named MechWarrior game, and the series kind of spiraled out for different reasons and just wasn't a mainstay anymore. Your studio has been working with MechWarrior Online for a bit. How did your studio get started working in the MechWarrior franchise, and sort of what are your origins for MechWarrior 5? That's a lot of question. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. No, I would say, well, first off, I was a fan, I played all those original PC games, even starting in '89. The original MechWarrior, which honestly might be one of the biggest inspirations for MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries. So I remember playing that one, begging my mom to buy it in the mall, and then we had to swap out the CGA monitor for an EGA monitor so I could do those simple new early graphics. And I played all of them, and I guess even the last one, MechWarrior 4 anyhow, would have been around even since we became a dev studio. So we started our studio in 2000, and 2000 to 2002 was where MechWarrior 4 and up to MechWarrior 4 Mercs was launched. So this was a brand I always had huge interest in. It was really a dream of mine to work with it, and I always felt like it was almost certainly well out of reach. But really long story short, we started to form a relationship with Jordan Wiseman, who had the original FOSSA, founder and creator, who had sold FOSSA to Microsoft, but then he had spent some years there and started a new studio and had licensed the rights back. And in 2008, we started that relationship. And 2009, we released this video. Some people might remember it. It was our attempt to kind of push for a new MechWarrior game. And that never got off the ground. But by 2011, we had managed to license those rights and started work on MechWarrior Online. So MechWarrior Online was something we were extremely interested in, but it was also kind of a step we felt like we had to take because either we weren't ready or the market wasn't ready or a number of things just weren't ready for the next single-player MechWarrior game yet. So we kind of established both ourselves and our knowledge of MechWarrior, but also kind of reestablished a foothold for the brand with MechWarrior Online. Ran that for a number of years, and then it was clear, though, the minute we started MechWarrior Online that the fans were super excited. And also, in the next breath, they were like, okay, great, but where is MechWarrior 5? So we knew all those years that this is something we really wanted to get to when the timing was right. And then it was early 2016, we started development. So full 3 years since we started some basic prototyping and production and ramping up to where we finally shipped it. So it's really a long path, dream come true.
Right on. I'm super happy. Super happy. It's great to hear about devs who get to sort of be inspired by games when they were younger and then get to follow in their footsteps as they build their careers. I am going to go to the chat real quick. We are going to ask, we're going to pull Hammerzite's question here. It's not quite super dev focused, but I like it, so I'm going to ask it anyway. How did it feel to make an entry to what is considered to be a premier PC series from the 90s and early 2000s, and how do you adapt this genre to today's markets, especially as a smaller studio? I stand corrected. That's a great question, Hammerzite.
It is a good question, and it definitely identifies some of the challenges that we face because it's not the same world and the same market and everything that it was in the 90s when MechWarrior was at its heyday, and so you have a lot of tough decisions to make early on in production. It's like, do you want to attempt something radically different that you think today's gamers want, will adapt to all of today's gamers, and try to establish it in that regard? Or do you want to give longtime fans of the franchise what they want? And we chose the latter, and I think that's for some good reasons. And it doesn't mean, of course, that MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries doesn't have a significant amount of modern updates when it comes to things, and not just visually and graphically, but in the destructible environments, even in the controls and a lot of things that modern games do today. But ultimately, what we decided to do was, let's update and give MechWarrior Mercenaries fans the game they always dreamed of. The one that when they were playing MechWarrior 4 Mercenaries or MechWarrior 2 Mercenaries, and they loved it to death, but when the experience was a little too linear and was over too fast, and they were left wanting just after maybe 8 to 10 hours of a single-player campaign, we decided, well, let's make something. In those moments, you're always dreaming, like, well, what if you could fly anywhere? What if you could take contracts anywhere? What if you could do this or that and had your own dropship and can actually see your mechs? And we tried to essentially bring what I felt like would be all the dreams of all those years playing those games to life in MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries. And in doing so, we would meet the requirements and dreams of longtime MechWarrior fans, but also by modernizing it to today's engines, technology, destructible environments, control schemes. We'd have also a chance to reach out to maybe a new generation of MechWarrior fans as well. So that's how we approached it. You could have gone a different way. You could have really radically changed and revolutionized the entire thing and hoped that it would find an audience. But we stuck with, well, we started with our core audience, I guess, and advanced the concept from there.
Right on. Hammerzite also wants to say thank you for making something as great as MechWarrior 5 after 17 years of, quote, Twilight years. I don't know if that's a specific reference to Battletech lore, but we are going to get to some other questions from folks in chat. Zaidi, Asme, we do see your questions, but for now we're going to lean in on some of the development-focused questions that we've got lined up here. Russ, the first one I have to ask is, I think what some of the things that defines MechWarrior for me and my love of giant robots is the sensation that, unlike other giant robot experiences in video games, this one is dedicated to make it feel like you're piloting something. You have the system where you move the torso and the legs in two different directions, the heat management. You and I were talking before the stream about our days playing this on joystick in the original series. As a new, without sort of any code or assets from the old games to sort of buoy you, that's an assumption I'm making. How did you start from the ground up making something that would feel like the old systems, that was probably more meant to be played on keyboard and mouse, since joysticks aren't as popular these days, and get that piloting sensation even without the piloting peripheral?
Yeah, well, it's one of the huge advantages we had. Was that even when we started MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries in early 2016, we had already been working on MechWarrior Online for over 5 years. Mm-hmm. So if there's people out there that know MechWarrior Online, there's we could talk and debate about it and its success rate, but here it is. It's a game. It's been around for 8 years in the free-to-play space, and there's one thing that everyone would agree on, I think, is that the mech combat is great. It's a high point of the product. So we really did establish really great mech combat, and so we were bringing that into MechWarrior 5. So we were starting with, I guess, a strong know-how of how to create strong mech combat, and starting with all the mech concepts and assets for all the battle mechs that we spent, well, now, the last 8 years concepting and developing, which is also another like top two strong point of MechWarrior Online and Piranha Games' work on MechWarrior, is really the establishing or reestablishing of the look and feel of all the battle mechs in the universe. Our artist, Alex Iglesias, has concepted out almost all of them at this point. I mean, there's still some we haven't got to, but there's so many. Well over 100 chassis in MechWarrior Online with 4 to 5 variants each, so we're up into the over 1,000 range, and people have really gravitated towards those, and it's really become kind of a standard now. We license those art assets out to a Harebrained Scheme, so you see the same mechs as MechWarrior Online and as MechWarrior 5 in Harebrained's BattleTech product as well, almost entirely. They've done a couple like the Hatchet Man, and they have the new one in their latest DLC, which is an original concept. But for the most part, it's been the new mechs that we've established here at Piranha and in MechWarrior Online. So we were bringing these two real strong pillars, I think, to the table. And that was a lot of know-how that we had either developed over the years and had at our disposal. And then, the rest. I think if you play MechWarrior 5, I think it also would be fair to say that that remains a high point. Our strength would be the mission-to-mission combat simulator is, maybe unsurprisingly, because of our history with MechWarrior 9, is the high point of MechWarrior 5 as well. But we had to develop other expertises in artificial intelligence systems and in campaign and storytelling. And I think those areas are good, but they're not as strong as some other areas. And so our strength are in the combat simulator. And so I think it might get to most of your question, or did I miss maybe a piece of that?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll zero in on the question of what do you think makes piloting feel good in a modern game space? Like, what do you think your team did right about the feeling of piloting?
Okay, yeah. Well, the torso twisting feeling, that is, and it's kind of it's good that you're showing the tutorial of the game here, because it is a type of game that still requires a tutorial, because there's a lot of people that don't have never played anything quite like this before, and that's what makes MechWarrior so unique, is that there is this concept that you're essentially a walking tank, and that's where MechWarrior 5 is good, because it has this really great third-person camera, which quickly explains to players that notion as you turn your torso. When you're in first-person mode, that can become a little more challenging to understand. So I think what makes it feel great is that even though it seems to people like it's slower combat than, say, like your average first-person shooter, I think the amount of things that's going through the person's brain while they're playing a game like MechWarrior is every bit as high or intense as any super twitch FPS. It's just that because you're always making movements on your controls, it's that you're thinking ahead, like 5 steps ahead. It's like, well, if I want to back up and get behind this building and get cover before that guy finishes turning around, then I've got to start making those movements ahead of time to slow this giant mech down, put it into reverse, and turn and back around that corner before he can finish his turn. So although what's being presented on the screen is a slower action simulation compared to a Twitch first-person shooter, I think the actions inside the player's head and the movements that they're planning is every bit as intense. So it's very satisfying that way. And you have the lumbering sounds, the turning sounds of your torso, the reaction as you shoot your weapons or take hits, the sparks in your cockpit that when you take a hit, as you lose bits and pieces of your mech, in turn losing weapons. There's just so many things that add up to a mech cockpit experience. And again, I think that's something we have had now about 8 years to fine-tune between MWO and MechWarrior 5. So the magic is in there, and it's just a collection, I think, of dozens of things that the guys have learned and developed over the last 8 years.
Right on. I'm going to jump to the chat real quick. I think CyberElf05 asked if there was any collaboration with the Harebrained Studios BattleTech team. I think you mentioned there that you guys just have been licensing mech designs to them. Anything else from the fine folks at Harebrained that have helped you out?
Not much, and there's not a lot between the studios in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
We know each other well. We're friends of each other, and they come at the MechCon and everything. For BattleTech, we licensed artwork to them, and they use that, and it's pretty much the same thing this way. The jump ship you see in the travel sequences is theirs. That's the only artwork that I'm aware of. But also, they offered quite a bit of valuable help in the localization front because they had already gone through localization of BattleTech, and I believe they shipped with the same languages that we did. We shipped with, besides English, we had French, German, and Russian, which are strong languages for the MechWarrior brand, and they had gone through the same process. So I know that our guys here in localization got help from a couple individuals on their side, helped out a lot on localization. So, that's about it. There's not, each of our studios, I think, are just so busy with our own games. There's not a lot of we're not talking about this campaign or the story with each other about each other's games or anything like that. But just help out. Oh, can we help you with local? Can we help you with some? Sure, you can use our art. We'll use some of yours and stuff like that. Stuff that would help with production time, production risk, things like that.
The Loke thing is actually something I would super want to dive into just because, reaching new markets in any video game space is kind of an important conversation for devs. I am going to dive to one more question before I return to my questions, however. Veritas the Snazzy Dragon would like to know, would you talk a little about how the mechs ported to MechWarrior Online were overhauled to have new damage models? For me, this is one of the most impressive parts of MechWarrior 5 visually. Y'all are asking some good questions today. Thank you.
Yeah, so we were able to bring over the mechs pretty much as is. We didn't remodel them, which was really key to our design. I mean, we're like, okay, we're only so big of a studio. It's not like we can remodel 6 years worth of models. So good thing that they were still really great models that hold up really well, and we brought them over. But we did know that we wanted to go significantly further with the damage state. In MechWarrior Online, it looks great, but it's limited really to basically just arm removal. Once the arms are blown off, I think that's the only thing that actually has a model swap, if I'm not mistaken. MechWarrior Online will model swap out the arms. And so, of course, we thought about a lot of different ways we could approach this, but we also wanted to be careful that we weren't overreaching into something overly complex where you spend massive amounts of engineering resources just to end up with something that looks kind of odd. So we basically just went with a kind of what we knew, but went a lot further. So in MechWarrior Online, you have the pristine paint. When you get shot with a laser, you have the laser glow. And then whenever you get shot, whether it's laser or anything, you have the damage texture layer. So it removes the paint and shows the pock marks and stuff like you're taking damage. And then that's kind of all the MWO does until a limb is lost, an arm is lost, and then you do the model swaps. In MechWarrior 5, we have the damage, the laser glow, and we have the damage texture, but we went a little further. We said, okay, damage texture represents your armor, you still have armor left on your mech. But when you get to internal structure, we're actually going to do a model swap. And then once all the internal structure is gone, we'll do another model swap to the destroyed state. And that's the case in almost every component, but obviously with the certain areas like center torso, when you're done with structure, your mech's dead anyhow, but there's still another model swap. So what this turns out to be is you have 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 torsos, a center torso, a head, and then even the rear torsos. And you add this up, I think it's something like, what is that, 2, 4, 6, 7 times 3, and I think I'm missing some. You end up having something like between 20 and 30. I'm a little rusty in this knowledge now. I used to have it all down perfectly, but somewhere between 20 and 30 various damage states per mech. And so it was a pretty big effort. If you look here, I guess your footage, it's recorded. You just walk past the Centurion. You can see that now on the screen. That's okay. They can see it. So these legs, I think that right leg there is destroyed. That's down to its a base model swap or the out of structure, and then the other leg might be showing some structure left. And so it did take quite a bit of effort with every chassis in the game. We had to model both states, both armor's gone and now structure's gone, and we do swaps based on everything. So that's how the system works, and I think for the most part it works. I'm really happy with it. It shows tons of detail when you get back to the mech lab, and that was part of the point too. It's like I want the feedback in real time in combat, but the whole point of MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries is coming back and being alive in this hangar, and you want to see that damage persist. So that was a main point as well. And I would say I'm like 95% happy with it. The only time it kind of trips up a little bit is in combat, because the model swaps are so precise. If you're very precise in your shooting, and say you're just hitting one particular component, like just the right dead center and the center torso, you'll see all the model swaps happening there, and it's a very distinct line. So I think if we were able to make any improvements, we'd try to do some sort of bleeding out from that pristine line to make it blend a little better. But otherwise, really happy with the overall system.
Right on. Brief shout out here to the voice actor behind this particular character, Spirits, because it's the same guy who voices Adam Jensen in Deus Ex, and I'm blanking on his name, but I love his voice.
That's Elias Tufexis.
That's it. Yeah, Elias. Yeah.
And he was also in BattleTech, as the people in China would know. He was the bad guy, red-haired bad guy in the cinematics where you... Anyhow, spoilers, so I won't say it, but he's in that game as well.
Yeah, right on. Let's talk about mech micromanagement outside of piloting. We just sort of got a glimpse a second ago into the loadout system, which looked very familiar as someone who played the old MechWarrior games. It looked familiar even as just someone who played BattleTech, like picking your loadout. I'm struck by how similar it was across the old games, that strategy game and your game. The types of weapons you have available. All of this is super familiar stuff. If you've been playing MechWarrior for as long as some of the folks in chat have been, this is old hat. How do you think you and your team approached redesigning those features for this game and making sure it was still accessible even to players who didn't know that, like, hey, it's not a good idea to just kit up your mech with all lasers because then it overheats?
Yeah, it's you're right. It's one of the key pillars of any MechWarrior game, and it's also very it's a big discussion point for a lot of people because there's so many ways to go about a mech lab, and in fact, as many numbered series mech games as there's a different mech lab.
Yeah,
and those that know the intricacies will understand that. Like, for example, people might remember that MechWarrior 3 was a no-holds-barred, almost Franken-mech system, which had maybe a few fans but some detractors, and MechWarrior 4 went with more of a size hardpoint system. MechWarrior Online, not part of the numbered series, but MechWarrior Online has, without a doubt, the most robust mech lab known to mankind. I mean, it is out there. It does everything. And so we had that experience of having a mech lab like MechWarrior Online, which is great for a PvP game. It allows people to do unbelievable numbers of different builds looking for the min-max situation. So we had all that, and we could have brought that over exactly to MechWarrior 5, but we didn't, and for a few reasons. One is it is way too much. If we're trying to reestablish MechWarrior single-player games, PvE, and be successful enough that maybe there's a MechWarrior 6 one day, we needed it to be understandable and reachable to more than just, the most hardcore fans of the brand. So that was a fairly big part of it, and of why we brought down the complexity somewhat. But maybe the bigger element, and this what I've expressed to the the MechWarrior Online community, and it is the bigger element, is MechWarrior 5 is not a PvP multiplayer game. It is a single player game that allows co-op play. And for this reason, you're also managing a mercenary unit unlike ever before, to a level of freedom that they've only dreamed about in the past. And in order for that to work, you really need all the various variants of the mechs and the markets that you visit in the star map to all have some meaning. with a MechWarrior Online style of mech lab, you can almost take any mech, and the customization level is so high that you can kind of accomplish the same thing that other mechs do well, just through customization. And we felt we needed to limit that quite a bit so that when you customize your mech, it has meaning, but you're also not overriding what other mechs would do. So when you go to the market and you see mechs for sale there, almost every one that's there has some meaning, like, oh, neat, I haven't seen that one yet. I'd really like to buy that one, and have this free market system in this metagame really work and make sense. So there's a couple reasons, but still, it's for a brand new player, there's still, plenty of depth there. I mean, you can still swap out weapons, 3 different types of that. So we have kind of a hardpoint system as well, like MechWarrior 4. So there are some restrictions, but you can generally put smaller ones in. But we just don't allow what's called hardpoint inflation, where you can't say pull out like a large energy weapon and then put like 3 small ones in. So anyhow, I think it's an hour-long conversation going to mech labs, but it's core to any MechWarrior experience for sure. And I feel like, anyhow, and I've got some feedback to this, some of the most hardcore MechWarrior Online fans might still long for the deeper mech lab, but I think for the most part the feedback has been that we found the right balance for this single player experience, market-driven game.
Right on. I will get back to some chat questions in a second. I wanted to ask about one more system and how you all approached it. As you mentioned, this game is not just about piloting the mechs; it's about running the whole mercenary group, taking systems to systems, contracts. So it's a really neat metagame that fits in with the story missions, negotiating contracts. I'm a super big fan of these systems because they help with that simulation aspect, and they help you personalize the decisions you're making on not just a mech design level, but like who is my group, what kind of jobs do we take on, like how much trouble are we in right now. I wish we had more time to dive into it on the stream, but cause we're just going through some of the early missions here. But how did your studio approach designing that one, knowing it would kind of be not just the anchor for your single player mission, not just a backbone for your single player missions, but also where people would be spending a lot of time if they chose to ignore the single player, all the main missions, and just go run their companies?
Yeah, I think fairly early on, one of the messages we kept saying, I know I repeated it in a lot of meetings, was, the game is lost, out the gate if we can't create a metagame experience in the front end that's nearly as fun as being out in the missions, or at least as addicting and engrossing to want to manage your company. So I don't know if we achieved that entirely. Meaning, I still think going out in the missions is the funnest aspect, but we did put a lot of effort into that to make sure that we tried to make that metagame experience really meaningful. So you touched on the high points. First off, there's the ability to travel anywhere you want, but it's fairly expensive to hire jump ships to take your drop ship and your unit places. So that's every time you travel, you're thinking about that, because there's 100,000 C-bills, 50,000 C-bills. That's a lot. And the other, I think one of the bigger innovations that we did in our game that I don't think has been done before is this notion that, sure, you can repair your mechs anywhere, but when you're in the war zone, it's more expensive to do repairs, and it takes more time. So we created this because we wanted to try to bring the star map alive, where players were actively always thinking about the star map and where they do certain things. And so we kind of went out of our way to, well, for one, if a player wants to hire pilots for their battle mechs, they're only available in the industrial hubs. And then to reinforce the industrial hubs, we also said, well, those are penalty-free areas to repair and to repair your mech, so they don't cost extra, and it doesn't take extra time. So now we've created a situation where there's a lot of motivations for the player to plan around how long they're visiting the war zones versus how long they're visiting the industrial hubs, And now there's a bit of pressure on you as a mercenary commander to try to have enough functioning mission-worthy battle mechs and pilots that you're not just going on one mission repairing everything, going on one mission repairing everything, but perhaps when you go to the war zone, you're thinking, well, we have enough mechs and pilots to do 2 missions, maybe even 3 if we've got a good stable, before we need to incur those costs to fly out to do all those repairs and whatnot. So we did quite a few things like that in hopes of bringing more life to the star map. The view intel button tells you which planets have which contracts and what mechs you might encounter in the battlefields and so on. So I hope that answers the question, but it was definitely a big effort for us. It wasn't just like it's all about the missions. When you go in here, there's nothing really to think about except which contract you accept. It's a little more than that. You think about the contracts, but you're always thinking about where should I fly next and when should we fly and stuff like that.
I like that answer. I especially like the part where you mentioned using the war zones as like as an incentive. Like, hey, you can only be in this area so long, your funds will run out. That's some good insight. Yeah, and speaking of that, Aaron Sedgwick Arc says there's an incentive to fill out your mech stable for that reason. I am going to go back to questions from chat for a minute. These will be a little off topic for Dev, but you guys have been great. We'll give you guys some questions that are a little off topic. Do you have any plans for mod support? And if that's the case, or if it's not the case, can you talk about what it takes to support modders for games like this?
Yeah, we do. We told the community quite a while ago that we plan to support mods, and in fact, we are preparing the editor for release right now. It's we told the community recently on our the Discord channel. So anyone who's bought the game at this point can get access to the MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries Discord channel, by the way. And so welcome you to come in there. And there's lots of good resources around joystick support and just a whole bunch of things. There's a bunch of drop areas if you're looking for people to play co-op with. But one of those things is mod support channels, and we just let everyone know that our goal is to release the editor here sometime next week before we all break for Christmas. I think there's a good chance that we're going to meet that goal. And so basically we're going to release the editor. And what that will do is it'll allow mod creators to get started. We're still going to be lacking a kind of a smooth end user experience for just like selecting and downloading mods. And so we're going to be working closely with Epic on that. I'm sure we're going to be one of the there's no timelines or ETAs yet on that aspect of it, but they're adding that kind of functionality to the Epic Game Store, similar to a Steamworks type of thing. And so we're going to be right there with them, I hope, being one of the first studios to support that. But you won't have to wait for that. I mean, the editor would be out soon, and people can get started making mods, and they can still, potentially share them with each other through more like old school methods. Like, here, take this folder, do this, do that. All sorts of things like that. And then we're going to be, looking to get more of that end user experience in as soon as we can. No ETA yet on that, but there's the answer.
Right on. That's actually. I also need to give a shout out to Centron for asking that question. I'm going to have questions about working with Epic in a bit, but let's see. We can talk about co-op questions like StarMex. StarMex says they're bringing in some questions from the NGNG TV community stream, so shout out to the folks at NGNG TV. StarMex would like to know if co-op players will interact with the StarMech and Mech Bay in the future, and I guess what was sort of the challenges of doing a co-op mode in the first place? Because I mean, take every problem you have making it for one player, multiply it by 2, and that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I mean, even adding peer-to-peer co-op, it might sound simple, and it perhaps compared to the online infrastructure that is required for something like MechWarrior Online, it is simple, but it still makes almost every programming task that you do in the game take twice as long, because almost everything you do you have to make sure is ready for co-op play or replicates to the player. So it definitely added a lot of development time, a lot of complexity, and things like he mentions, I don't know what the likelihood of stuff like that is, because you have to consider things like, well, it's not just technical requirements that we have to consider. We have to consider, gameplay aspects like, does your friend or person that you're playing the game with, do you want him to actually spend your C bills? Because in instant action, so it's not a limitation of technology, because in instant action, you can edit your mech, edit your loadout, edit your paint job, all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to playing in someone else's campaign game, you don't. There's a different aspect there, because they have certain mechs in their campaign. They don't have all mechs, and they have certain pilots. And you come in and you essentially take the place of one of those AI pilots. So you become, name an AI pilot's name. It's like, okay, you're going to be him. So play him for me, and play this mech, and come out in my missions with me and help out. So you don't bring your own stuff in. And we also didn't think that we could allow the player to adjust and spend the person's campaign that you're in, because then it is going to open up a massive can of worms of like, yeah, well, we'll put in options to say if you want to allow it or not. So everything's possible with time, but we might have had to release December 2020 if we wanted to put all of that stuff in. So who knows where patches or updates will go from here. No commitments, but I will be listening, and we understand people are really enjoying co-op, and I'm sure there'll be a few there'll be some additions and adjustments, just as long as we're being careful and just remembering that this is it's not MechWarrior Online. It's a single player game that allows co-op play. The majority of their co-op play will probably be in instant action, but helping your buddy out in his campaign is certainly fun. But you just remember that you're in his campaign and using his C bills and his equipment.
Right on. Gonna get one more question from Hammersite, which before I move on to some other questions. What were the positives and negatives of experiences of developing this game? How did it go transitioning to a new engine, and how was it? How was the transition to working? They say Hammersite asks, how was it like transitioning to a genre where narrative was at the front and center compared to the multiplayer online, MechWarrior Online? I would rephrase the question as, what was it like transitioning to a single-player campaign, just kind of a campaign thing, because narrative-focused may be not quite the adjective I would use. But I guess, I like his question. What were the ups and downs of making this game?
Oh, my goodness. In hindsight, it feels like... so Piranha Games is not a brand new studio, right?
Yeah.
We've been around now for 20 years. However, even making this game was still a massive challenge. It was very hard. There almost was no aspect of the game that wasn't incredibly challenging. I mean, the base core mech combat, damage model system, everything that was challenging, but probably the one area that, coming from MechWarrior Online, that was, even though we felt challenges, we knew where we were going and how we were going to get there. But almost every other aspect, from telling a story, which obviously MechWarrior Online has nothing like that, creating the AI systems, creating the procedurally generated missions, everything at one point in the project felt like extremely challenging, and oh my god, are we actually going to be able to do this? So I couldn't even narrow it down. There must be a half a dozen systems that were very, very challenging, and there were moments during the development where you wonder if you're going to succeed at finishing off that item, or if you're going to have to drastically change the way the game works, and stuff. So we came through, and I believe every case, and so very challenging production. I think that goes for a few reasons. I mean, a lot of CEOs might feel this way about almost every game they make, but I do think there was some extra challenge here, because even though we're a veteran studio, we've been around for a long time, but we had been 100% in PvP multiplayer game for the last 5-6 years previous to making MechWarrior 5. So yeah, a lot of challenges in almost every area.
Right on. I'm going to move on to some questions on my part. Just a heads up for folks, we got about 20 minutes left in the stream, so if you've got some questions, get them in chat. We're going to talk about some other stuff, but we'll grab more before we're out of here. Let's talk about the Epic Game Store. This is a big new thing for the game world. It's been literally a year almost a year to the day since it launched. That might not be entirely correct, but it's been a year since the like it kicked off at the right around the time of the Game Awards. Hades launched on early access back then, and you all were able to choose to be an Epic Game Store exclusive for your launch, which is I think that's such an interesting decision. In a world where you say okay, our market is PC players, we're only going to launch on PC, and then to say right now the best choice for us is to launch on the Epic Game Store and exclusively work with them. What's that process been like, and how did it feel working with Epic as a partner?
Well, big question. I would say, the jury's still out a little bit to say if 100% everything works out the way we thought it would or planned it would when we decided to take the Epic Game Store deal. Mm-hmm. We took it for a number of reasons, which I'll get into, but I think we still have some, maybe even like a few months to go here before we can say if all of it panned out like we hoped it might. So, but the reason that we took it, there was I've known the guys over there for quite a long time, as a lot of developers do, because they've been working with Unreal Engine at one time or another over long careers, and you get to know the guys over there well. But we were already using Unreal 4. Obviously, we started development in 2016, and we had been a kind of company though that with MechWarrior Online, we've been self-publishing and selling our own games on our own portal now for years and years. So we were developing MechWarrior 5, not really, just kind of intending that it would be sold everywhere, including our own portal. And that was the plan. And there really wasn't any knowledge. I didn't even know that, Epic was, necessarily even doing these types of deals. You just started to kind of hear about it. Maybe, I would say, even in early 2019, first quarter 2019, you start to hear about, I think Metro Exodus is one of the first ones I kind of heard about, where it's like, oh, there's a thing going on here, this is making the news. Okay, this is interesting. Still didn't have any, really knowledge that we'd do something like that. At any rate, I had a conversation with Joe, and it probably wasn't until April or May that we had our first real conversation with them that this came up as like, oh, there's something to consider here. There's an opportunity. There's a proposal to become one of these games. And so for us, as any small developer would say, is like, well, what are the pros and cons? And one of the major benefits, of course, was we felt very strongly that we were going to be able to make a better game, because it was going to, just the nature of switching over to the other store, changing how the co-op is going to work with the Epic Game Store, and a few other things that we were going to be able to move our release date from September to December, which was going to make it the full 1 year delay really from the original release date. And we just had a pretty good idea of just how much extra quality we were going to be able to put into the game. And so that was really the number one thing. Mm-hmm. And then there's other deal terms that I won't get into specifics here, but there's other deal terms that add on top of that, where it's like removes a significant amount of risk for small studios, that, or perhaps even all the risk. And it says, well, then it almost becomes just a bad decision if you don't, because we've got a situation where we can make a better game and remove the risk. And then if I'm talking about the type of game that I'm making and who I'm making it for, this becomes a very easy decision, because I want to deliver the best MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries game I can. That's my number one priority as a developer. And if you do that, you have a lot of faith that the rest of it was going to work itself out, because all that really matters in the end is quality. People want a quality product that they can play, and they can play for a very long time. So that really made it pretty easy for us, and we started to work on it. And I think, in hindsight, that part has definitely worked out. The quality of the game is significantly higher than it would have been with an earlier release. And working with Epic has been good. They've been very, very, very responsive, and they take care of the developers that work with them very well, because they understand that we're under some challenges when it comes to The marketplace still adapting to maybe some of the things they're not happy with about the exclusivities, and then also understanding that their store is behind when it comes to features compared to the big stores like Steam, and so they work really closely with you to prioritize the things that you need for your game, and to just work hard to get updates as fast as they can. So I think it's worked out pretty well for us. I'm not sure I've answered all the intricacies of your question, but that's kind of a gist of our story on it. And I think for MechWarrior fans out there, at the very least, should be, I think, happy that the game got the amount of resources and development time that we were able to give it. And some of that was due to us doing that Epic Game Store deal.
Right on. We can address one thing that folks in chat are asking about. You mentioned before we started the stream that you had a new update going out today. It looks like that update has arrived. Folks are asking where the patch notes will be posted, and I guess what we talk about the nature of making games in 2019 is different than making games in 2004 and different in 1994. And one of the things has to be that games are not just a fixed product that goes on the shelves and is done. They have patches and notes and updates and expansions. And how are you all thinking about this isn't a live game, this isn't MechWarrior Online, but I guess the first question is for folks to help the folks in chat out, what's going on with this patch, and then the follow-up question is how have you sort of structured the studio to be able to keep working on MechWarrior after it launches?
Yeah, it's a good question because we've been really reminding ourselves of that too. Saying, okay, this is not MechWarrior Online, because it takes a lot of reminders even for ourselves in that regard. But quickly, so the hotfix that just went out. This one is very small. The patch notes will be on the Discord channel. They'll be pinned there somewhere for sure. And this one in particular is just a few small fixes to some of the HOTAS controllers. In particular, there was a crash when if you had your HOTAS joystick plugged in as well as having foot pedals plugged in all at the same time, it would cause a crash. And some other kind of related aspects. So that was something we wanted to get out right away without waiting on anything else. So that's what is in this hotfix. Now, it's not as confirmed yet, but there's a plan for there to be another hotfix on another one this week. It'll probably be on Thursday. Possible it could slip to Friday, but I'm anticipating it'll be more like Thursday around this time. And that one's a little bigger and a little more significant. It's got several crash fixes, some other I don't have the notes in front of me, but the notes will be up on Discord. But that one, it's got some other fixes for the tutorial mission, which some optimizations we'll call it, as well as some crashes. So there's fairly significant fixes for stability we wanted to get out into the game before the weekend hit. So look for those patch notes on Thursday. So hopefully, the larger playing numbers of the weekend will have a better time for us pushing out a couple hot fixes here before the weekend hits. And then, if everything holds, there's likely to be at least one more patch next week before we break for Christmas, targeted around midweek, maybe as early as Tuesday. That one is probably bigger than the other two combined. But basically just a number of fixes, we'll call it, before we break for Christmas. So be a total of 3 patches, and obviously the goal here is to just make sure that the game is in as good a state as possible, because it's been a long 3 years and we're all tired, and we hope we can get a nice restful Christmas break between December 20th and about January 2nd. So our plan is to not be fixing the game during that period, so we want it to be working well. And as far as in general, we have to remind ourselves that this isn't MechWarrior Online, so we're not looking to do scheduled patches like every 2 weeks, like we did for the first several years of MechWarrior Online, and then every month after that, and that comes down to every little tuning of every little balancing, because it was a PvP game. This will live come the new year, a little more like a traditional, premium product. Um, we hope there will be, we'll be watching the sales. We're a little over 24 hours here, so I don't think we know yet just how much of a DLC plan there will be. That'll kind of be dictated by how things go over here for the next few weeks. I think that's, um, it's fair. People don't understand that's probably the case, and so we'll be watching and waiting, and we'll be designing and planning our DLC plan. And so most of the updates will come through more larger DLC type situation, but I'm sure there'll be several planned free updates, of course, as well. Anything that's like a bug fix or whatever, those are going to be free updates, of course.
Right on. It's time's about 12:51 here. This footage is only pre-recorded. I only was able to play the game so much before we got here, so we got time left to take your questions and talk more about MechWarrior. Russ, I am going to pull one question from chat. This is kind of granular, but Doom Machine would like to know if there's anything we looked at as far as sensor ranges and enemy spawns being so close to enemies spawning close to players. If that's being looked into at all.
Yeah. Well, at the moment we're not looking into it. It has been a matter that has gone through several iterations before we released. It's not perfect, so I think we would say we would continue to look at it. Basically, you've got a challenging situation where we need enemies to spawn in for the action, but also especially in these wave-based mission types. But also we're trying to account for the fact that we have up to 3 co-op players, and it's like understanding exactly where all the co-op players are and which direction everyone's looking is kind of tricky to make sure we get our spawns. So I think we have a system right now where like 90% of the time it works great, and then every once in a while you're like, oh, wait a minute, how did he get there that quickly? Like, I was just looking that way, then I turn around, there he is 200 meters away. So I think it's something that will definitely go through more fine-tuning. So I think it's safe to say you can expect at least some more fine-tuning on systems like that.
Right on. And then one more question from chat. Grace 3 Pastry Chef would like to know if more mission types would be coming along to help add variety to the game.
I think so. I think that probably, just at first blush, this early on is probably something that fits more into a DLC type environment where, we might have a DLC pack, and let's say it, add a number of things, maybe another mini campaign, and perhaps more mission types. And then likely if that happens, those new mission types potentially could just kind of proliferate throughout the inner sphere. But those sort of things are not decided yet. Those are design decisions that we still have to make. Hopefully forgive us that we really haven't had a lot of time to think about DLC yet. I think the big studios, the big companies, they of course, they'd have this dialed in 30, 60, 90 day and stuff. And so being a small studio, we need to be a little more reactionary than some. But hopefully it feels like we're very close, within days of being able to really sit back and go, okay, what's next? And there have been some of those conversations happening already in the studio. Some of the artists, some of the designers, just a lot of brainstorming, a lot of whiteboarding, a lot of... but also there's still a lot of reactionary stuff for us to do, like seeing what people are saying. So we're just now like a day and a half into getting an idea of what the players feel like would be the most desired things. So we'll be making decisions over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully there's no shortage of great ideas both internally and with the players. So I'm sure if hopefully the game and the success justifies it, because I'm sure we could work on updates for this game for a very long time.
Right on. I'll follow up on that question with you was talking there about being a small company. You've mentioned a few times, being a 70-person team. As a CEO, I guess, like, how does it feel, to like be keeping a mid-sized company alive and afloat out there in today's world? Is there anything you think you've done right by your team for like making them want to stay there and work with you, like making them, not scaling up to 200 people? Like what have you sort of learned, like, as a small shop, keeping your doors open and stuff? That's a vague
Yeah.
question. I'm sorry about that,
No,
but
it's okay. No, it's a good question. I'm sure it's a matter of opinion because I'm sure there's plenty of devs out there maybe that belong to very small, indie shops, and they're thinking, wait a minute, 70's on a small studio. But from my perspective, it really is. We've been doing this 20 years now. So December 20th is our launch party, and also our 20-year anniversary is our studio. So we've gone through all the years where we were 12 to 15 and to 30 to 40 to 60 to 70. And it's interesting, back when we were like 40 or 50 then or 30, and the big studios were 70. And now it's kind of the scaling of how much bigger things getting now and what it takes to create games. And now that we're 70, we really haven't climbed out of that small to mid tier yet. Because now those studios are 100 to 120. So I think we're still a small studio, and I think the greatest accomplishment has been that we have kept an independent development studio open for 20 years. Mm-hmm. That is not easy, and if you think it is, do me a favor, go start a game studio, and then have 70 staff, and let me know in 20 years if you're still around. It takes a lot to go right, and a lot of hard work, and we've managed to do it, which is grateful for. So that's the part I'm most proud of, is tallying up just the number of months and that I've been able to employ people and keep them employed and be able to make games that we all like. So that's that has been 20-year journey, and I'm not sure where it ends yet, but not yet. We're going to be around for a bit longer anyhow, and we got a game to work on here. So I guess that's all any independent developer can ask for.
Right on. We are about to close up, but I'm going to get one more question in from chat because it's just such a good one. Ziety1 would like to know, what was a big aha moment during development?
Whew. I almost feel like this is going to be like the other one. It's like, well, we had about 10 of them, and every one of them felt like, oh my god. An aha moment. I'll take a little bit of a different look at this to answer it. I'm probably going to... the way I'll answer this, I think, is like when we had a moment where it was like, aha, this thing is going to work. This thing it's going to happen. Like, this game is coming together, and and I think it might even be pretty good. And I think that probably came, oh boy, maybe even as late as 6 or so months ago, when we put together this urban test environment, city environment, which finally for the first time had kind of brought everything together, both mechs, the mech combat, the turrets, the vehicles, but most importantly, sort of a final city garrison environment where all the tall buildings and the fully destructible city environment that you see in some of these urban settings. And we're able to jump in there, and we were able to play, and I'm running around the city, walking right through buildings and chasing a light mech around the city, and as I missed, the bullets are obliterating the side of other buildings, and I sat back, had a big smile on my face, and I was just like, okay, this is gonna work. This is really fun, and there's really nothing else out there like it. And that was an aha moment for me to kind of give me a lot of confidence that there was still a ton of work to do, but that we could bring it home.
Right on. Everyone in chat, folks like Commissar Punk, Throny Joe, your Blood Marauder, y'all are great. Y'all are asking some great questions. I would ask them all for you if I had the time, but I do not, sadly. Time is a finite resource, and wait, that got a little dark. Okay, we're gonna walk away from that thread. Russ, thank you so much for joining us today. I can see we've had some new folks join us in the last part of the and sort of the last few minutes. I would encourage you to go back and watch the earlier part of the stream. We're going to archive all this for you to get some other questions answered. For folks like Sprogue who are just coming in because of the new patch, Russ has already explained that those patch notes will be available in the Discord. Russ, is the Discord also a place where people can provide feedback and ask some of the great questions that they're asking?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of channels. There's feedback channels, bug report channels, everything you'd expect.
Got it. So I wish I had a link to the Discord handy I could drop in chat. But where's a place they can find a link to that?
Oh boy, I'm the worst at these sort of things. All I know is the server name is MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries. So yeah, you'll find it.
Right on. I am trying to find a link, and I unfortunately cannot. But yeah. Let me see. With that, sorry for stumbling over my words there. We are going to wrap things up for today. Thank you all so much for joining us. Russ, if they've got any questions for you, just like as devs, moving away from the fan questions, where's a good place they can reach out to you about that?
Best place is Discord channel. You'll see us listed there. I don't know how your success rate will be on direct messaging, but Tina is a community manager, and usually being able to talk to her if she can come directly to us and say, hey, here's something I think that was noteworthy. I got this question from somebody, and she can ask us.
Right on. I was able to drop the Discord link in chat for folks who do not have it yet. And with that, we are going to wrap things up for the day. Thank you all so much for watching, and Russ, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
I forgot to do more of my closing spiel because I was so focused on the Discord link. If you are yourself a game developer interested in game development, this is GDC, the GDC Twitch channel. We are always here talking about the art and business of making games. If you happen to drop by on Friday, we're going to be doing a stream with the folks behind Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition. So I'm just spending this week reliving my 90s childhood, apparently, with PC games. If you join us in the new year, we will have more streams from other great devs as we ramp up for GDC in March. If you're a developer yourself, we'd love to have you out at the show. And if you are interested in coming to the show, scroll down and you can get some info on registration. If you click the follow button on this channel, you will get notifications when we go live. And not only do we have those interviews I mentioned, but we will have the Game Developers Choice Awards and IGF Awards ceremonies live at the show. And so hopefully some other cool stuff too. With that, I would like to wish everyone a happy Wednesday. And that's it. Enjoy your mechs. Enjoy blowing stuff up.
Thank you.